From a beat-up cargo van to a booming franchise empire, I want you to join us as we unpack the journey of Nick Friedman, the mastermind behind College Hunks.
Welcome to Fordify Live with your host, Ford Saeks.
Today, we're thrilled to welcome Nick Friedman, the entrepreneurial force behind College Hunks, hauling junk and moving. From humble beginnings, Nick, I want you to share with our listeners, how did you go from that dorm room to growing this big company and also now getting awards for it?
Yeah, well, I would say most kids don't grow up saying, I want to be a moving and hauling business owner when I grow up. And I was no different. I was brought up to follow that more traditional career path, work hard in school, get good grades, get a good job after you graduate. And the summer before our senior year of college, we were home for summer vacation. And my best friend from high school, his mom had a beat up cargo van. And she was like, why don't you guys go take the van? You can move people's furniture. And she looked at us and paused and goes, you guys could be like college hunks who haul junk. And we just kind of laughed about it at first. But then we were like, actually, that's a catchy name. So went around with flyers and stuck them in mailboxes. People started calling. They had a need for the service. They thought the name was catchy. And that was the light bulb moment for me, is if, this is the opportunity, the path that we could take to, provide a service that people need, that they interact with. And so I call it a 20-year overnight success. Today, we've got over 200 franchise owners all around the country. We do close to 300 million in annual sales, which is pretty crazy to even fathom, coming from just a beat up cargo van to thousands of trucks, thousands of hunks around the country as well, moving the furniture, hauling the junk away.
Now, we are live right now on Facebook and LinkedIn and YouTube and Twitter and a few other places. And this is an episode of the Business Growth Show podcast. So if you guys are listening to this, you may have heard him before, but you probably would have seen him before on shows like H.U.N.K.S and Undercover Boss, where you were able to showcase not only your business acumen, but also your commitment to innovation and leadership. So I really appreciate you joining us for today. When you started to grow, now looking back now, what advice would you have given yourself that you know now that you wish you would have known when you started?
Yeah, well, I always say urgency of effort, but patience for the results. Because when you get out of the gates as an entrepreneur, you want it all to happen right away. We live in this society where it's, instant gratification, and we see the headlines in the news about these unicorn billionaire companies. And that's just not the reality of what it takes to build a successful business, a successful brand. So when we first started, I always tell the story, we went and bought an 800 number because we wanted to make ourselves look like a big national company. We put it on the back of the truck, but it was still routed to our cell phone. People would call to complain about driving, and I'd be in the driver's seat answering the phone saying, oh no, we'll fire those guys when they get back to the office. Probably fired ourselves like 3 or 4 times that first summer and started to burn out a little bit. And eventually, we learned this concept of working on the business, not in the business, and learning how to create processes and systems for the business to grow. And that was really the next light bulb moment for me was, hey, if we're ever going to have another truck, let alone another location, which was our grand vision, we've got to create systems on how to do this. So I would go back in time and I would tell my younger self, I'd say, hey, be patient. It's going to all work out. It might take a little bit longer than you think it's going to take. It might be a little bit harder than you think it's going to be. But that's why entrepreneurs are all eternal optimists, because if we didn't think our idea was going to work, we would never pursue it to begin with. So you've got to have that optimism, but you also have to have that patience.
Yeah, I certainly agree. And when I look back on my advice, I started a sporting goods company. I was a professional cyclist, and I invented a bike rack that went from floor to ceiling to store your bikes in a limited space. And I grew it from a garage operation to multi-million dollars in sales, and through mass merchants and specialty catalogs and Sharper Image and SkyMall and all these things. And what I found was, people are strong in one of 3 areas. They're either great at delivering the product or service, which obviously we all are in business. Number 2, marketing and sales, or number 3, leadership and management. Well, I was really strong in the marketing side. So for me, I struggled with the systems and the processes because I was a critical thinker. I'm an entrepreneur. And like you said, most entrepreneurs, they're over optimistic about what they can get done, right? And so they have these grand visions. But I think the sage advice that you just shared about being patient is so important today for any business, whether you're a solopreneur, an entrepreneur. And we have businesses that are our listeners that are private equity groups. We have franchise brands. We have franchisees. We have small business owners. We have other speakers that just follow me. And when it all comes down to it really comes down to accelerating growth. And when you look through what's happened, post pandemic, and you look at your growth now, what's on the future for you growing? Are you trying to open more? Do you have any corporate locations, or what's the breakdown? You've got 200 locations, which is the magic number is like 25, then 50, then 100. So if you've reached 200, you're well on the way to accelerating. What's in the future for you guys?
Yeah, I mean, so there really is something to this compounding, the momentum and the compounding of, not just interest like you hear about in finance and econ, but the compounding of effort, the compounding of improvement, continuous improvement. And so while I've over the years succumbed to these, impulses to chase the next shiny object, which again, I think a lot of entrepreneurs have this, inherent ADD, which I say stands for all damn day, because you can't turn it off. There's discipline and focus that can lead to that compounding and the compounding results. So we have a great brand. We've got a great platform that we've built to this point. And so I don't want to take my foot off that accelerator. I'm a big firm believer in maximizing the potential of myself as a leader, maximizing the potential of the team and my people in the organization, and maximizing the potential of this brand and this platform of what it creates. So it creates amazing franchise opportunities for our franchisees. It creates amazing employment opportunities for our team members, amazing service and relief to the junk or the stress of moving that people have out in their communities. And so we want to continue to just compound upon that. And so that just means more franchise owners doing more volume and becoming more fulfilled along the way. And if we can continue to do that, it's going to continue to touch more lives and be more impactful as a result. So that really is the short-term goal. I would say long-term, yes, we might explore new sectors or segments to expand into, whether that be, building further into our long distance moving capabilities, our storage capabilities, leveraging our client footprint to be able to offer additional services or brands adjacently. But I think, in the near term, we want to stay disciplined, focused, and just keep doing more incrementally better every single day.
Yeah, I think it's really important. When I had the sporting goods company, I was told, marketing coach, which of course now I'm a high paid marketing coach, right? But they said, you need to diversify. You need to diversify. You've already got your channels of distribution. Just go find other products that your core target market wants. And what I found with diversification was it's also diversification. You can spend a lot of time and money, and what sounds good, looks good on paper isn't necessarily good in reality. So that's not to say there aren't opportunities out there and there aren't ways to do it, but I appreciate the fact that you're looking at that not only from, you want to keep your eye on the ball. What's your core client want? What's your value proposition? The companies that I've worked with, as a keynote speaker, I go in, I speak at annual conferences and, write books on the subject. And what I always find is that the companies that are trying to either grow too fast, they're undercapitalized, or their franchisees, they didn't do a good job evaluating the franchisee to begin with. They were just interested in growth. They weren't really interested in the quality of that franchisee, which of course we've all seen the stories in the news from, small brands all the way up to, huge brands that have oversold or didn't create the systems and the support, the culture and the community. For me, I decided that, what's my core competency? What's the highest and best use of my time? And then how do I hire my weaknesses? So I don't know about you, but you're running this company. I appreciate you taking the time to join us on this episode. What are some of the challenges that you face now that you've got this multi-million-dollar company? You've obviously got, the great team and great leadership. What are some of the things that you're struggling with, and how are you overcoming it?
Well, two things I want to touch on. One, I think it's worth repeating the importance of focus and discipline and the compound effect that it has. And it is a balance because, as the entrepreneur, as the visionary, I come up with 100 new ideas a day. And I can be a little bit overwhelming to the team if I'm firing them off every time they hit my head. So I've disciplined myself to keep the ideas on a running list. And we do what we call a same page meeting once a month with our company president, where he allows us to talk through the ideas just to get them off my chest. In some cases, as an entrepreneur, I just want to do that. We can vet them. We can put some back on the shelf, what we call the parking lot. We can talk about if there's any quick wins we can take. So that's actually one of the challenges for me, was kind of elevating my role into that of this visionary, where I know I'm good at ideas. I know I'm good at creative pursuits and building strategic relationships. but I'm not as good at the day-to-day nuts and bolts executing of the business. And so we've got great people to to fill those seats out and to execute it again better than I could do. And it's timely that we're talking about some of this stuff. I actually just got back from the Berkshire Hathaway shareholder conference. I went with my dad as like a father-son trip, but got to hear Warren Buffett speak. And at 93 years old, it's just incredible to hear the wisdom he imparts. I mean, there's a guy that's compounded his investments for 60 years, outpaced the S&P by 1,000%. And it's really about, to your point, not diversifying, not having, a mile wide, inch deep, a bunch of little holes dug, but going deeper versus wider, which is actually something we talk about with our franchise owners quite regularly as well. There's always this inclination or, belief that you got to have more territory or you got to have more franchises, when in actuality, you go deeper and saturate your existing territory further. And there's that compound effect that every client touch in that market can turn into a second one. And so that's all the running dialogue I have with myself and with our franchise owners as well.
Yeah, that makes total sense. I know for those of our listeners, we talked about visionary. Well, there's a famous book by Gino Wickman and his whole program, the Entrepreneur Operating System, which talks about entrepreneurs being visionaries. And then you need to have an integrator that gets shit done. Whoops. I can push my own button. It's my show. I can say that. No offense. I wouldn't never say that in a keynote. So for those meeting planners listening, look, this is a podcast. We're having fun today. But as it relates to that, I've had to find myself with a parking lot. We'll do a mind map. We have a decision-making matrix because I'll see shiny objects everywhere. And I'm like, oh, we need to go do this, or let's create a funnel for this. And then, my team I've trained them to say, okay, here's our priorities. This is the conditions of satisfaction. This is how we're going to make decisions. And I set that system up because I knew as an entrepreneur, I'd come up with too many different ideas, right? So I had to make sure that I had a parking lot, which was exactly what we call it. And we use mind mapping so that it allows me to sort my thoughts out more effectively. And then I just looked at it the other day with my marketing director, Devin, and she showed me the parking lot, and we had over 99 different concepts in there. And so we were on Zoom and she's like, do you really want me to add this or can we pass? And I was like, okay, so I've had to surround myself with critical thinkers. And just like when I grew my sporting goods company up, I grew it up. It was at $10 million in sales, the best year. And we sold $50 million before I sold the company. And I found I was really skilled at getting it to a certain level. And then I had to bring in people that were a lot smarter than me that understood, cash flow and management a lot more effectively. Sure, I understand financial statements and balance sheets and income statements and inventory turns, but I really needed that outside advice. And that's one of the things. I know I'm an EO member, Entrepreneurs Organization member, and I love the little forum meetings because that gives me an opportunity to get told straight talk and to bounce ideas off other companies. Like I was on a forum meeting with our group on Monday, and one of the guys sold his business for $500 million. The other guy did a $50 million contract with the government. So it's like when you surround yourself with those types of thinkers, and that's one of the reasons I appreciate you taking the time to join us on this episode, because I love hearing entrepreneurial journeys, straight talk from people who've, been in the trenches, that know how to make payroll, that deal with the day-to-day operations, that deal with staffing issues and the economy, and buyer behaviors have changed and all the different things we face. But I want to echo the last point before I turn it back over to you is what I think is so important is that you understand your core competency and you understand what you do. And that's the challenge that I get brought into to speak to franchise groups is, the franchisee always wants the franchisor to do more, right? Come up with more things that we can sell. And they're always diverting the attention to the corporate. And I'm not talking about yours specifically, but I'm just talking about in general in franchising. And then the franchisor is like, look, we're giving you all the systems. We're giving you the training. We're giving you everything you need to be successful, but you have to execute. And I don't know, how do you balance that with your franchisees? Do you feel like they're all, and again, hypothetically, I know we're not talking about every single, franchise owner, but do you feel like everybody's pretty much in line going the direction you want? Or do you still feel like you've got those rogue every once in a while pops up that you just have to revisit?
Well, the good news is if you're in a sound franchise brand and franchise system, which we believe ours is, the system proves the results. And so the ones who are winning in the business, when asked, what's working, how are you being so successful? 9 out of 10 times, maybe 10 out of 10 times, they're going to say, I just did exactly what was laid out for me in the franchising playbook. Now, maybe in that 1 out of 10 where they said, they came up with an innovative idea or they came up with a new twist, they brought it back to us and we collaborated it together and have said, oh yeah, that's a great fit for the overall system. Let's do that. But if you've got a franchise system where if you've got 200 individual owners all running in different directions, it's chaos. And so we always say that when you invest in a franchise, it's it's a playbook, it's a system, it's a roadmap. You've got to, one of the things we do on day one of franchise training is, we have them visualize what their business looks like 3 years out. Like Stephen Covey says, you start with the end in mind, and then we work to the present day and say, okay, here's the playbook and the roadmap that's going to get you there. Now, imagine if you've got your GPS and it tells you, the roads to follow to get to where you want to go. And you decide, well, no, you know what? I think I know how to get there faster. And I'm going to take a left here, a right here, a left here. Your GPS is going to keep recalculating. And before you know it, you've, driven way out of the way. You're lost. Your GPS is confused. You've got, you're driving in circles. And so we use that analogy a lot with our franchise owners to drive home that point that, the play works. Yes, it's going to continue to evolve. But don't invest in a franchise if you're not going to follow the system, because otherwise you should have just tried to start something on your own.
Yeah, and that's so true. I mean, I was recently keynoting at a large fitness organization, which we'll rename nameless because you'd know who it is. And I was doing an opening keynote. It was on local area marketing. So we're talking about, referral culture and how do you expand the things that they're control of. Obviously, the corporate has the national voice, but how does that local franchisee build awareness in the community, build relationships, and build business? And so I did a hot seat where I asked for a volunteer, and the guy came up and the things that he was in this brand, they were allowed to do their own social media. They could do YouTube and Facebook because they wanted the local engagement. Some organizations, say, hey, look, we'll handle that for you. We'll handle your Google business versus your local. But this company does, and they have, over 2,000 locations. And so I pulled up his Instagram. And I kid you not, it was a skull and crossbones with their logo. And I just was like, okay, now what do I do? And of course, the leadership is in the back of the room, the CEO, like your co-founders in the corner. And I'm just like, okay, how do I handle this? So I said, I'm not sure, but I don't think this is probably brand compliant. And so they went ahead and, let me turn that off for just a second. Sorry. So they went ahead and he fixed it at the break, and he was very happy to fix it. But it was interesting how, he'd been in the organization for a decade, but because he'd been there so long and he was very successful in his market, he just started to stray away from the system because, again, they think, oh, well, I know better. This is my market. And that was actually one of the things he said. He said, well, look, I know my market. My market loves this brand. My market, and the director of training who was in the room with me speaking, grabbed the microphone and said, well, look, yes, I'm sure you do, but this is really our brand, and this is why. And he came around really quickly because I was just like, oh my goodness, I'm flying without a net here. I shouldn't have opened that door, but it was actually a really great experience for the brand because I'm sure there were, probably a few hundred other people in the room that probably had done similar things that they just didn't know what they didn't know. So, even though this show is a lot on business growth and entrepreneurship, what I like about franchising is it's really entrepreneurs. At the end of the day, whether you are a franchise owner or not, you're still an entrepreneur. You're still responsible for getting up. The advantage of a franchisee is that you have a system to follow, that you're not stuck trying to figure it out. And like you said, with that GPS analogy, you're not just driving around trying to figure out, thinking you know better. You're getting the collective voice of all those 200 other best practices. Now, does College Hunks, do they have a franchise advisory council or anything?
We do. So yeah, we have a very active, very engaged advisory council. It's franchise owners that are qualified, who volunteer their time and energy to really be a channel between what some of the decisions we're making at the home office, we call Brand Central, yep, and the franchisees out in the field, what they're feeling, what they're seeing, what they're experiencing. And that collaboration, that team of teams dynamic, where it's not command and control, top down direction, but it really is this interconnected, interdependent ecosystem where we're all invested in the same common thing, which is the brand. That's the success that we all rely on. And as the brand value increases, so too does the
Yep.
individual business owner's value. And I think keeping that in mind has been so critical. And so we've been very blessed and grateful to have some amazing members of our franchise advisory council who have helped, really guide and influence the continued evolution of the brand.
I'm just curious, with your success over the years, what's in your success library? Are there any, and I'm not selling any books or anything, I'm just saying, but are there any books or process? I know you mentioned Stephen Covey, you mentioned like Gino Wickman's EOS. I'm just curious, what is in your success library because I'm sure that when challenges have come up, your perspective at how to overcome those challenges is based upon the fact that you've continued personal development. Like you said, you can always better your best.
Yeah. I mean, what's funny is in school, I was never really that passionate of learning. Once we were business owners and entrepreneurs and I started reading books or going to trade shows or conferences or listening to podcasts like yours, I became very quickly a student of entrepreneurship and realized that the most successful people are lifelong learners.
Yes, definitely.
Again, back to the Warren Buffett and, in the Berkshire Hathaway model. I mean, they're avid readers and, they already have that intuition, but that learning agility is so critical to leadership. And so we talked about some of the books that have been influential to me. Some others that come to mind, obviously, I think is the Bible of business leadership is Good to Great by Jim Collins,
yep.
Which is really powerful. I'm a big believer in the Patrick Lencioni 5 Dysfunctions of a Team concept, where the foundation of trust is at the core of every winning team, followed by trust is healthy debate or healthy conflict, followed by that is commitment to decisions. Next on the pyramid is accountability. And then at the top is results of the organization above the individual ego. And so those are two that really stand out. Purple Cow is one by a guy named Seth Godin, where he's, all about standing out in a crowded landscape. So for us, anybody could be in the moving business. You get a truck, you get a logo, you get a name and a website, you're in business. So how do we stand out? Well, we got a catchy name. We got bright orange and green trucks. We park them all over, but more importantly, we got a very intentional focus on the team member and client experience. And that's what really sets us apart, quite frankly, from everybody else. And so those are some of the books in our library. And then one that is kind of an oldie but goodie is a book called Maximum Achievement by Brian Tracy. I read that recently, and I've actually found myself coming back to that quite frequently because it's a lot about the mindset. And, as you go through these evolutions in life and in business, you got to sort of reset your thought process quite regularly. And so I've actually really enjoyed that recently.
Yeah, I find that the more I learn, Nick, the more I know I don't know. Right. I mean, I think in my 20s and 30s, and I've been an entrepreneur since I was 15 years old. I've had 17 different companies and 3 went 7-figure. And, I just know the more I know, and the more I interview experts and CEOs and founders of companies, the more I'm just fascinated with. There are a lot of similarities that are through lines that carry through, but one of them for sure is a lifelong learning. And I think nowadays there really is no excuses anymore. I mean, there's a podcast on every single topic. There's YouTube, there's TikTok, Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, Instagram, and so forth. And there's so much content out there. And, books. I mean, I've authored multiple books. I have a book on franchising that I wrote specifically for the local franchisee so that they had a playbook that they could follow that would be in conjunction with the franchise brand. And when I first started, it was interesting because I was an entrepreneur and I was an inventor. I have patents and I grew companies and I had a think tank. When I first got into franchising, boy, did I learn the lesson the long way. Don't use the word innovation. Like, excel. So I went from a business growth innovator to a business growth accelerator because franchise brands want to accelerate. They don't want me to innovate. They don't want me to come in and change. So I become a third-party endorsement for the things that they're already saying, as well as giving them new ways to look at the things and to use the tools, their playbooks, their sales playbook, referral culture book, whatever they're doing to grow. And so, I think it's really important for our listeners is regardless of what the challenges that you have in your business, regardless if you're in leadership management, in building a culture or in marketing or sales or digital, doesn't matter what modality, there are resources. And if not, there are mentors that you can look through. I think the best sage advice I'd give though is consider the source. Like you said, if you go to Warren Buffett and you go to Berkshire Hathaway and you're able to actually be in the room and listen to a man who's done, billions, who just his thought processes, that's what I find is so interesting, is how they make decisions, how they think, the critical thinking skills, the open-mindedness versus the closed-mindedness. And that was actually a book, Catherine, I think it's somewhere down here on my shelf, on mindset, right? Because, I have a consulting client right now who, have invested a lot of money with me. I've spent a lot of time with her over the last 6 months, and she just hasn't executed, right? And so, she sent me a letter saying, hey, I really haven't gotten much out of this. How about a refund? And I had to refer to the contract and say, well, first of all, consulting is not refundable as much as I'd love to, but let's revisit. What are you doing? What are your goals, and how have your goals changed? And let's put the focus where it needs to be. And I think that sometimes in business, franchisees sometimes blame the franchisor, or they look to someone else. Oh, there's no business in my market. Yet you can point to 2 other franchisees who have a very similar market that are top producers. And so I think the lesson is, it starts with that personal accountability.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. I mean, at the end of the day, I think it was Tony Robbins who said, if information was all we needed, we would all be billionaires and we'd all have 6-pack abs, because, the information is out there. The information is out there on how to do it. And you kind of connect the dots as you read the different books, and you see the similar threads along all the successful people and how they've done it. So then it does boil down to execution, personal accountability, and, in some cases, capability. Is the person capable of producing the results themselves, or can they bring the team around them to help them do it as well? And, that's why I sometimes also say entrepreneurship or business ownership, even as a franchisee, isn't for everyone, because there is a high degree of uncertainty. There is a high degree of stress. It's not linear. It's not, a consistent paycheck. There's, headaches and ups and downs and people challenges and everything in between. And so I think if you get into that eyes wide open, and I think if a franchisor does a good job of vetting the candidates and prospective franchise owners, then it can be a very successful recipe. But if people get into it for the wrong reasons, or they want to get rich quick, then it's not going to work. And so the other thing I always recommend, I mean, you mentioned EO, Entrepreneurs Organization. I was a member there for almost 10 years. I've been a member in another organization similar called YPO, Young Presidents Organization. I think getting in your peer group.
But I don't qualify for YPO, okay? The YPO is like $50 million.
Yeah, well, you keep, you've done 17 different businesses, so I just stuck to one. But it's all good, all good, man. And so I think being around peers, being around people that are also have that growth mindset, also have that high ambition, high willingness to learn and grow and develop, you won't feel like you're on an island. And that's why there's power in franchising, because you're part of a community. That's why there's power in a peer group like EO, Entrepreneurs Organization, and a forum, even, a smaller community within that organization, because you're surrounded by people that are going to help you on the way out and be part of that journey.
Well, thank you so much. Any final thoughts that you want to share with our listeners before we end the episode? When we do, stick around right after I play the ending. But I just really want to tell you, I appreciate you being on the show. What was it? I do want to ask you, we'll ask one more question. What was it like when you were on Shark Tank and Undercover Boss? Because I would see that as a brand building, awareness. It helps exposure. I always tell people that the purpose of media isn't when you're on media or on TV, it's the repurposing of it, right? It's the ability to say, to use that as social proof, because whether it was positive or negative, it still shows, well, you had to reach a certain level of success in order to be associated with those guys. So what was that experience like?
Oh, it was incredible. We were on the very first episode of the very first season of Shark Tank. So that was kind of a fun claim to fame. And we were actually going to pitch a sister company. Thank goodness we never pursued the business. It was going to be called College Foxes Packing Boxes. Oh. And that was the Sharks' reaction too.
You might not might not work today. It might have worked then, but I don't know if it'd be too politically correct.
Exactly. The Sharks, actually, Robert Herjavec made an offer. We ended up turning it down because he wanted equity in our College Hunks business as part of the collateral, which was a fair offer, but glad we didn't take the deal, because the business is, probably worth 100 times more than what he offered back then. But we also didn't know those sharks were going to turn into television celebrities. And then more recently, we were on Undercover Boss. That was just a really fun experience, a great way to showcase our culture and our values, to the world, really. And to your point, those were brand building opportunities.
Yep.
We are a consumer brand, so we need to get the name out there and create some credibility around it and some awareness. And so, people will still recognize the brand from seeing it on one of those shows, or if they've seen the truck in the community and they've also seen it on one of the shows, they'll connect those dots. And so it's been really, I think, worthwhile endeavor to have those lucky moments.
Well, a question on that: when your franchisees are out bidding a job, and so obviously I always tell people, you don't want to compete on price. If it's ever a price question, it's always a value question. It's building trust and credibility. Are your franchisees leveraging that in testimonials to show why you would charge more than maybe the competition? Because, like you said, the problem with that type of business is a chuck in a truck can, go get a magnet with a sign on it, and now all of a sudden they're in business, even though that's significantly different than a professional company with insurance and experience and that you can trust. But I know that service type businesses run into that a lot because it's easy to get into but hard to stay in. How are they leveraging social proof when they're giving the proposals?
Yeah, no, you hit it on the head. I mean, we tried to really build that trust and that care from the very beginning. You're letting a complete stranger come into your home to move their belongings, whether it's the junk you're getting rid of or your personal belongings, you're moving to another part of town or another part of the state. And so the trust and the care is so paramount, so critical. Yes, the fact that we've been on those shows has been helpful. It adds to that credibility and trust. Our testimonials, our online reviews, all of those things go hand in hand with building that credibility. And, yes, hopefully we invest more in our infrastructure to be able to deliver on that trust. So we do anticipate we're going to have to charge more than the independent guy with a beat up cargo van like we used to be.
And so where can listeners go if they want to hire you guys or if they want to learn more about franchise opportunities?
Yeah, so collegehunksfranchise.com is our franchise info. Or if you just want to learn about moving and hauling, you can go to collegehunks.com. You can also connect with me on all the social media platforms. I'm pretty easy to find.
Awesome. Well, thanks again for joining us on Fordify Live.
Thank you.
Thank you for tuning in to Fordify Live. Make sure to like, comment, and share this episode on your favorite social media platform. And don't forget to subscribe to the Business Growth Show podcast, available wherever you get your podcast streaming fix. We air weekly at 11 a.m. Central Time. So until next week, keep pushing the boundaries and never stop growing.